Hello, I'm David Hepworth. Thanks for clicking this word in your ear, the latest of hundreds of chats Mark Allen and I have had over recent years, some between ourselves and others with musicians, authors, comedians, and other people we like. If you'd like to help make sure they continue, you might consider being a Patreon supporter by visiting patreon.com/wordinyourear, or just by liking or subscribing in whatever way you prefer. On with the show.
You're listening to a podcast from The Word.
Do you know, I was surprised at how kind of slightly upset I was by the passing of Maggie Smith. I know, it's not unexpected. I was surprised she was 89, actually. I didn't have her as quite as old as that.
Well, she's been there all our lives. Another one.
And, you know, I was told by my youngest daughter, who, of course, is familiar with her via kind of Harry Potter and Downton Abbey and so forth. And I had to tell her that I can barely remember a time when Maggie Smith wasn't famous, you know, wasn't kind of part of the scene. You know, I remember her playing Desdemona opposite Laurence Olivier's Blacked Up Olivier in 1965, I think that was. And I can remember her winning the Oscar for the prime of Miss Jean Brodie, which would be very late 60s, which is still an enormous favourite of mine.
Fantastic film.
And still a thing I refer to, you know, quite regularly. Every time I find myself in Edinburgh, you know.
Try and do the accent.
May girls and broody girls.
Broody girls. They showed clips of it. There was a special on BBC Two last night, and they showed some clips of it. It's fantastic. It was Celia Johnson reads out the letter about the sexual intercourse.
Oh, God.
It's just so funny. And the way and when Maggie Smith's trying not to laugh, you try to keep some decorum. She's superb.
There's a hell of a long career, that is really, you know, to encompass absolutely all that. It's extraordinary. And of course, latterly, you know, she could also always be relied upon to turn up on a chat show and kind of provide somebody in the role of the grand dame, you know, like Dame Edith Evans used to do about 40 years ago or something, you know.
I was watching those things last night. There's 2 or 3 things really struck me, actually. One was they showed all these clips of her on the Michael Parkinson show and Barry Norman, and it just reminded me how much chat shows have changed. You know, if you look at the formula now of, say, Graham Norton, the idea of an ideal clip from Graham Norton is purely about comedy. It's purely about celebrity, and they've only got 2 things they've got to do. One is a funny thing happened to me while I was filming, and the other is I'm going to plug my whatever it is, new film or book, you know. But actually in those days, those chat shows were completely different, and they were really interested in kind of plumbing the souls of the people they had on there and asking about the nature of their work. And my God, she's so good and so revealing because she's given the chance to talk about it. She says, I just work all the time. She said that films are a really lonely business because you're often there for a very short period of time and you never get into the social circle of anybody. So this is why I like doing theatre, because then you can go there and it's the same people for quite a long time, and you can get to know them and they become a kind of family. I thought that was really interesting. I thought it was interesting she'd become friends with Judi Dench because they must have been massive rivals for so long. And their careers were so similar. Straight roles, drama roles, Shakespeare, and then ultimately big commercial roles, both of them, James Bond and Harry Potter. And then they obviously got to the point where they just thought, well, we can't be rivals. I mean, they genuinely were friends, I think, because we both achieved the same kind of thing. And the last thing, which I thought was really fascinating, was the whole thing about Harry Potter. So there she is. It must happen to so many people. You've got this enormous career, incredible performances in Shakespeare, stuff that people have completely forgotten because you're suddenly in Downton Abbey. And she said, it totally changed my life for the better in terms of the money, which I'm sure she didn't need. But then she said, I couldn't do anything. I couldn't go to the supermarket. I couldn't go to the art gallery. I couldn't do anything on my own because I was suddenly recognised by a whole new generation of people. And I just thought, that must be so hard.
Yeah.
It's a difficult balance, isn't it?
It's funny you should say that thing about old chat shows, because I was only thinking the same thing this week, partly in the light of Maggie Smith's death, because one of the clips that came round on YouTube, and if you haven't seen it already, do seek it out, is when she ends up on Parkinson, I think it is, with Kenneth Williams.
Oh, yeah, reading the poem.
And Sir John Betjeman.
It's fantastic.
And they're reading Betjeman's poem about a death in Cheltenham. I can't remember the poem.
Yeah.
And the two of them just gather around a book. And they worked a lot together before.
Yeah,
review in the
good
60s
friends.
and so forth. And they're both beautiful speaking voices, very exact enunciation. And they do this kind of a verse piece. And God, it's really moving. And it's no less moving because Betjeman is clearly finding it moving. At
the end, he just says, thank you so much. He's almost in tears.
It's a wonderful thing. And in the same week, I happened to see, again, just turned up on YouTube, a Bob Hope appearance on the Dick Cavett show in the States in, I imagine, the late 70s. And he just goes on there, and clearly there's no agenda. There's no agreement about what he's going to talk about. He'll talk about whatever Dick Cavett asked him about, And he won't be madly confessional or anything like that, but talks about golf, talks about money, talks about politicians, talks about people he remembers from vaudeville and so forth. And the whole tenor of it is totally different because nobody is tense until there's a laugh. Because if you watch Graham Norton or any of those programs nowadays, they're entirely choreographed about the search for a laugh. It's agreed this segment will culminate in this laugh, this big laugh. There'll be this seal bark from the audience where everybody recognizes this is the big joke. There's no such agreement in the Bob Hope on Dick Cavett. It might be funny. It might not. It might just be absolutely straight. It might lead nowhere. It doesn't matter. And it's so much more relaxing, I find, to watch.
I couldn't agree more. I was watching Graham Norton, I think it was last night actually. It was Richard Ayoade, Lady Gaga, Demi Moore, and Colin Farrell. I mean, a really good combination of people because you're just agonized the whole time for all of them, trying to keep their oar in, trying to chip in and be funny, trying not to be forgotten, trying to look like they're interested when the other person's doing their sell. And then you're also fascinated by the architecture of it because you know all the way through that there are going to be staged gags. Demi Moore is suddenly going to be reminded she's got a little puppy that she now takes to things. And so, of course, you're going to see that little puppy. And sure enough, out comes somebody with the little puppy and it does its little bit, it's taken away again. And there are little bits where, Colin Farrell and Richard Ayoade do a little set piece that they prepare, but they have to pretend that it's spontaneous. And it is a strain. I mean, it's really funny. It's really funny, but you're never going to find out anything about anybody. All you're going to find out is their capacity for working with other people and appearing to be able to muck in. And hopefully sparks will fly.
I saw another one recently, which was when Clive James had a chat show, and his guests were Peter Cook and Dame Edna. What's his name?
Barry Humphries.
Barry Humphries.
I've seen that one,
and they're just fantastic because they're all. I mean, Cook and Barry Humphries, both of whom could be a real handful, are both on their best behavior, so nobody's plastered or anything like that.
Yeah.
And so they both do their bit, but then they both listen to each other when the other one does his bit. And you think to yourself, can you imagine any major TV channel nowadays saying, okay, we're gonna have three blokes with really big brains on the television, live for the next hour, and they might do anything. Clive James, Peter Cook, and Barry Humphries. It's just absolutely extraordinary.
And we're gonna go with it. We don't know where it'll end. That's the excitement. It's thrilling.
It's wonderful stuff.
No, the format for current shows, also, you're never going to get a revelation because these people are in the company of 2 or 3 other people, which makes them very self-conscious anyway, but people they don't know. And so you're never going to come up with anything, completely original or revelatory because you'd just be too embarrassed to do it in that circumstance, would you?
Yeah. So anyway, Maggie Smith, a salute to Maggie Smith. And talking
in movies this week.
In movies this week,
Megalopolis. Are you following this?
I am following this. Talking to people in their 80s in the film.
Oh my God. Shall I try and recap what I think has happened so far?
Yes, the story's.
It's a really complicated story. I'm sure people listening will know this story. But as far as I can see, Francis Ford Coppola is launching. I think it launched yesterday. Actually, we're recording on Sunday, so it was actually on Friday. His new movie Megalopolis, which it appears he has put $150 million of his own money into because he couldn't get sufficient backing. And this involved the sale of an enormous winery on the West Coast. And the predictions are that it may make as little as $5 million in its opening weekend. And there's so much involved in this story, I think. We were reading, I think both of us, a thing about by the New York Times, which described it as majestically bonkers, this film. He started working on it in 1977. He started developing it in 1983. This is just such an investment of time and money that he's just obviously not going to give up on it. He's 85 now. And one of the themes was very like the September 11 attacks. And so that was one of the reasons it was abandoned. There were lots of reasons it got abandoned along the way. And it's not the first time that he's put his money in his own money. And I mean, nobody would finance Apocalypse Now. I think in 1979, he managed to scrape together the money himself. And the film by the New York Times is described as unboilable. It said it's an avant-garde, dystopian, science fiction fable that veers into satire, fever dream, mystery, romance, and comedy. Adam Driver plays a visionary architect who's determined to rebuild a decaying city called New Rome as a utopia. John Voight plays a wealthy buffoon with a Donald J. Trump mannerism. Sheila LaBeouf spends a large part of the film in drag. Revenge tastes best while you're wearing a dress, etc. Then there was the whole thing about the press trailers. He put out this trailer, didn't he, which was withdrawn by Lionsgate, the distributor, because in it he had fabricated quotes from real film critics and he mentioned them by name.
He didn't. Here's the amazing thing. He didn't do this. It was done by the film company or consultant of the film company. Basically, they'd done some early screenings of this film at festivals, and it hadn't been received well. And so they thought, well, we got to take this on the chin somehow. And so basically, our argument will be, well, works of genius aren't always recognized as such when they first come out. So the opening of the trailer had these fake quotes from venerable movie critics, late movie critics like Pauline Kael and Roger Ebert.
It actually mentions them, doesn't it?
Pauline Kael absolutely mentions them. And
she had said apparently that The Godfather was diminished by its artiness. Which actually, her real review was incredibly positive.
She never said any of these things at all.
And Rex Reed, you see that one about Apocalypse Now? They described it as an epic piece of trash. That's completely made up.
They made up bad reviews, attributed them to really well-known late film critics, made this trailer as if to say, well, so don't take any notice of what anybody might say about Megalopolis, because they said the same about The Godfather.
Critics get it wrong.
No, they bloody didn't. And then they had to withdraw it. And they said, and their apology for withdrawing it, is it Lionsgate is the company, I think. And he said, we apologize for a failure in our vetting procedures.
Yeah.
What has this got to do with vetting procedures? This is not vetting procedures. This is a load of highly paid people sitting around a boardroom table for months going, I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll fake a load of old quotes.
How did they imagine they'd ever get away with that?
I can't believe they ever thought.
There's a Roger Ebert review, allegedly, of Bram Stoker's Dracula. They described it was a triumph of style over substance. In fact, that wasn't. He did say that, but he said that about Tim Burton's Batman. I mean, these people are all still alive. They're still reading it.
Well, no, they're not. They're not still alive. They're not still alive. I think they very carefully pick people who are not alive, actually.
Oh, right.
Which I think makes it even more disgraceful.
It is disgraceful because the people couldn't defend themselves. Yeah.
And this is bloody Hollywood, where they're all terribly precious about what they do themselves, but they obviously think the press. You can do anything you like. I think it's absolutely disgraceful.
It is a total disgrace.
I think they deserve to lose their shirts over it.
Yeah, they do.
Which clearly, well, they're losing Francis Ford Coppola's shirt. You know, that's he paid for the making of the film, and he also thought, if I pay for the making of the film, somebody will pay for marketing it. Well, he couldn't find anybody to pay for marketing it, so he's had to pay for that as well. So here's my question to you now. Yeah. I've just watched an interview with him and said, well, okay, I've done everything I wanted to do in my life. I don't want to, die with a load of money in the bank. I want to say I did everything I could, And his whole drive behind this thing was, it's a wake-up call to the world. We're going wrong, not for the first time in the history of film or the history of anything. And my question to you is it any longer possible, even with the best will in the world and a following wind or whatever, is it any longer possible for a piece of creative work, like a film or a novel or a record, to make the kind of impact on everyone's consciousness that Francis Ford Coppola hopes
he will get? That's a really good question. And I think probably not. One of the reasons is that our attention is spread so widely, and we're so involved with so many things that we're not all going to stop what we're doing and concentrate on this one thing. And I think the other thing is that I don't think you can, in the age of social media, I don't think you can have that kind of impact with a launch anymore, because a lot of it's about what happens the week it comes out. And they're talking about the money they're going to recoup. And I don't think that opening weekend thing can really work anymore, because in the old days, you used to you'd be running trailers, you'd be carpet bombing NBC's Thursday night lineup with ads. You would have critics saying hopefully the right things. And what you'd hope to do is, before the news got out that this was an absolute stinker, enough people would have gone to theatres for a week or so, and that they would have seen it and given you some of that money back. I mean, I don't think that's possible anymore, partly because I don't think the opinion of critics matters nearly as much as it used to.
Oh,
do you? Just not at all. That's not remaining. Also, I think people think that critics, A, do get it wrong. B, I think they think they're often in the pocket of the industry, and therefore what they're saying is not necessarily the truth. It may be something associated with an advertising relationship they have with that studio in their publication or whatever. And thirdly, I think that people think, well, critics are people who don't pay for entertainment. I am paying for entertainment. And am I going to pay to go and see Megalopolis? That's a very different thing from, seeing it in the Venice Film Festival. At the festival, it got a 10-minute standing ovation. Right, fine, of course. But what are they applauding? Are they applauding that film, or are they applauding Francis Ford Coppola? Yeah. Are they applauding the idea that Coppola is doing this brave thing and putting his hand in his own pocket? It's not to do with whether that film is worth, the money in your pocket, I reckon.
No, the only thing I could think was that if you had some great message film project that you wanted to kind of drop a word in the world's ear around with, I would have thought your best medium nowadays is long form television. That's what's more likely to grip people. It's a Breaking Bad type, The Wire type, Game of Thrones relationship. You know what I mean? It's not to do with going to a cinema on one occasion and watching something for 2.5 hours, but it might be, or it's more likely to be effective if it's a long form television thing.
But also long form
snags right.
Yeah, and long form gives people a chance to kind of catch up with each other. Because the other thing about a new movie, I think, is that I don't feel, and you're probably the same, I don't feel any tearing rush now to be the first in line to see something. There was a time when a new film came out and I've got to have an opinion about this. Everyone's talking about it. I must have an opinion. The only way you get an opinion, obviously, was by physically going out to the nearest cinema and watching it. But now my feeling is that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to me that I'm not first to see it. I will see it if I want to see it, and I'll see it probably via streaming and probably a week or two after everybody else. That doesn't bother me. So that's part of the problem too, I think, with things that are just single items coming out trying to make an impact. But you're absolutely right. Breaking Bad had been out for about 18 months before I kind of got onto it. When I got onto it, I realized that there was a growing number of people getting onto it and talking about it. And suddenly it reached this massive peak, didn't it? This extraordinary thing where it became, everyone was saying, is this the best thing that's ever been on television? And still really fondly remember. The Wire, very similar, actually.
Yeah. I think that kind of format works better for those kind of things.
Yeah.
But you see, what I always think when film people, particularly grand old film people like Francis Ford Coppola, when they're talking about the passing of the glory days of film, and you can't do the things you used to do, I can't help thinking that the thing they really miss is the fuss. They used to be able to they were at the center of a fuss when they did something. The world stopped for a month while they put their film out, Everybody was awestruck by people on the red carpet at Leicester Square or all that kind of stuff. They liked the hype. They liked the hoopla, It was less to do with the product and more to do with the fuss around the product. And I think people in the entertainment business generally are more enamored with the fuss than they care to confess, actually.
Yeah.
They absolutely love the fuss. And nowadays, because of streaming, everything is just there all the time. There's less fuss. It's a low-level hum of distraction constantly.
Yeah.
Rather than long periods of nothing interrupted by explosions of something for a short period of time, then we go back to nothingness again.
Yes.
It doesn't work like that anymore.
Very well put.
It doesn't work like that in films or in movies or anything. You were mentioning about Chappell talking about music, talking about Chappell, Roan and Sabrina Carpenters, the two big new things of the late summer, apparent even to old codgers like you and me, that they.
About whom I know nothing at all, actually.
Okay,
don't know if you do, but there's a really good example of
here's the thing you need to know about them, Mark. They have both kind of come to prominence this summer, but they've both been at it 10 years.
Yeah.
That's the difference. They're both young women, but they've both been at it 10 years, what I mean? Kicking around forever. In the case of Sabrina Carpenter, come out of the Disney factory of kind of cute young girls who started off in TV shows and whatever, then go through the mill and then re-emerge as pop stars, and Chappell Roan started, I think 2017 or something, signed to whoever it was via a YouTube clip. Nothing really happened, went back to her old life, came back again. They both of them, I think, is it Sabrina Carpenter's been on Taylor Swift's tour, and Chappell Roan's been on Olivia Rodrigo's tour, so they both had really well-placed kind of support spotlights and so forth, and they just burst through, apparently from nowhere, but clearly the spade work, the shovel work has been done for absolutely bloody years, what I mean? Millions will have been spent one way or another on doing things around these names. And they
I love that when that happens. It's like the eventual success of Jarvis Cocker after all those years. And Ian Hunter, who we talked to the other day, actually. Ian Hunter, really good example, wasn't it? Ian Hunter, pretty much 26 years. We did this podcast with him, which is be out next week. Pretty much 26 years between his winning the talent contest at Butlin's in 1954, I think it was, which he told us about when he was about 15, and all the young dudes in 1972. 26 years of hacking away at the coalface, trying to get some real success.
Well, he never thought. He said, because he was kicking around. Where was he kicking around? Somewhere in the Midlands. I forget exactly where. It was in two different places, and he said when Mott the Hoople contacted him, or when he got the opportunity to join Mott the Hoople, he never thought that he was ever going to have a professional musical career, really. He was working in the factory. He had a wife and 2 kids.
Yeah.
He kind of given up on all that. And then gets the opportunity to join Mott the Hoople. And, Mott the Hoople have their 2 or 3 years in the spotlight, and then they're about to knock it on the head. And then they get given all the young dudes. And so suddenly they're, really big for a short period of time.
Don't you think it'd make a great film? In our running series of movies they ought to make, those 26 years before he's successful. After he's successful, I'm less interested, funny enough, because I kind of know about it. And he's above the parapet. But before that period in the little skiffle groups and psychedelic groups and winning the talent contest, then eventually goes to Hamburg. I think in about 1963, and he's on the Reeperbahn in Hamburg. Playing in clubs. It's just an extraordinary story. The other one I thought would be good was we interviewed Simon Raymond of the Cocteau Twins and This Mortal Coil for a podcast. I think up now, actually. And he talked about his dad, didn't he? Ivor Raymond, the arranger and writer. And there's a brilliant bit in that, which is just this 1 week, I think, would make a movie. Ivor Raymond, former coal miner, was injured in the coal mine, damaged his hand, and he couldn't work anymore. And he carried on trying to play piano with just 9 fingers, and just got better and better, got into jazz bands, never went back to the pit. Got a job in a jazz band on the Queen Mary, playing in the first class lounge. He's gone from being a coal miner to, in the first class lounge of the Queen Mary, Hedy Lamarr and Jack Benny in the front row of his audience. And they go to, this is the time just after, it still is rationing, it's 1949, and it's steaks and it's roast beef and it's puddings and whipped cream, it's pancakes and maple syrup, it's booze. He can't believe it. They get off the boat, and those 36 hours in which he doesn't sleep, when they go out to Birdland and see Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie and go to every single jazz club and buy all these American clothes. I thought that story in itself would be an incredible movie. Just that 1 week in his life.
I tell you, interesting chat with Simon Raymond. And one of the things it does remind you, it doesn't nudge you to do, if you haven't already done it, is if you've got an older relative or a parent or whatever, and you've thought about recording an interview with them, do it. Do it for God's sake. Because Simon says he didn't know any of this about his father, really, because his father died when he was quite young. Although he does remember looking out the garden and seeing Scott Walker out the garden.
Yeah.
Because he used to arrange Scott Walker and Walker Brothers records. But anyway, Ivor Raymond died before Simon was old enough to really quiz him about his work. But his mother had sat down with his father and recorded
this.
And he said he was so grateful that his mother had done this,
Yeah, and he transcribed his...
In every family, there is somebody who you thought, I must get round to asking Auntie so-and-so or whatever, or Uncle so-and-so.
Yeah, you should do it sooner rather than later.
Bloody do it.
Yeah.
Do not feel self-conscious about it at all. You
and I have a mutual friend, our old pal Phil Thomas. He did this brilliant thing with his dad, who subsequently died, actually, I think last year. So he's really glad, because we saw him the other day, and he's so glad he did it. He did a Desert Island Discs with his dad, didn't he?
Right.
He said to his dad, just choose 6 or 7 songs that kind of illustrate moments, punctuate your life, and I will interview you for a Desert Island Disc. We'll pretend it's Desert Island Discs. And he sent it to us, and it's just wonderful, isn't it? Just those ideas of just jotting down this stuff before it disappears are invaluable, I think.
Yeah. So, that's Simon Raymond. That's out there now. What was this about Hamlet and Radiohead?
Oh, just that Radiohead are Tom York is reworking Hail to the Thief for a Hamlet production. and I just I couldn't really get my head around it. They feel that various people feel that there are similar themes in Hail to the Thief as there are in Hamlet, and he is now reworking it for a special production. It's coming out next year, I think, using his music. And I know more than that, really. It's just another example of rock music reaching out into the high arts.
Well, I think the reaching has probably been done the other way around, isn't it? The woman
yes, it is, actually.
The woman who's directing it, she's a big fan of Hail to the Thief. It's probably just a way of getting your production of Hamlet somehow, into the newspaper.
Yeah.
Or, getting the youngsters along or whatever. Although how young Radiohead fans would be, I do not know. It's I have to think it must be odd if you if you go to see, if somebody says to you, have you ever seen Hamlet? And people say, yes, I did see it once. It was a production, it's rather odd actually, because it was done with the music of Pete Brown's Battered Ornaments or Budgie or, Sandy Shaw or whatever. It's kind of odd, isn't it, really? Because, if you want to see Hamlet, tell you what, go and see Hamlet.
Go and see Hamlet.
It's there.
This can't be the bait.
It's available, I know. The additional stuff is kind of neither here nor there,
Yeah.
It's all...
The 12th Night version with music of the senseless things. It's probably not as good as the original one. I don't know.
Go see the original show.
Go and see the original show. Exactly.
Because in the end...
So look, Bryan Ferry, Dave.
Oh, Bryan Ferry. Bryan
Ferry's got this, is it a 5-disc retrospective coming out? It's a kind of entire career type thing.
It's called Retrospective. And it just struck me, and I saw the announcement about this, and it's got the usual kind of additional tracks, odd remixes, whatever. But I think it's got 5 CDs, and one of the kind of the solo hits, one of the cover versions, one of the kind of jazzy stuff. I don't know, one from films, and it just struck me. I like Bryan Ferry. I never thought I liked Bryan Ferry, but I've slowly come round to realizing that I do like Bryan Ferry. And I play Bryan Ferry records quite a lot. Having gone through long periods where I kind of rather looked down on the idea of Bryan Ferry. Yeah. There he is, the aging lounge lizard, And I've noticed I kind of like the aging lounge lizard. I like the ludicrous phrasing, the kind of over the top enunciation. I like these great meaty kind of clubby versions he does of Let's Stick Together and The Price of Love and all those kind of things, which have invariably got what do you call him? Paul Thompson on the drums and Chris Spedding on the guitar. Usually got band made up of Northerners. I seem to. There's something very Northern about Bryan Ferry. Oddly enough, for somebody who probably doesn't stray very far out of Kensington these days. There's something about Bryan
Going back
Ferry.
to his roots.
I could always feel the cold wind whipping off the North Sea during anything that Bryan Ferry performs. And here's the other thing. His cover versions. He's done a lot of Bob Dylan cover versions. He did an album called Dylan-esque, didn't he?
He did. And this I note the thing that we got advertised in the CD retrospective. It describes him as, it proves he's a master modern interpreter of song via dizzyingly inventive series of cover versions that range from Dylan to Amy Winehouse, Rodgers and Hart, Velvet Underground, via Tim Buckley, Shakespeare, sea shanties, and Sam and Dave. Actually, that variety is pretty amazing, isn't it?
It is.
My feeling about Bryan Ferry is I never connected with him back in the day because he, Roxy Music happened in 1972, and I was kind of hitchhiking around Europe and stuff, and I wasn't really paying attention. And I became obsessed with American music. I was totally caught up in the romance of kind of American culture, and I wasn't really, and I couldn't see that there was anything I had in common with this guy in the DJ and the tux and with the martini and But as an interpreter, I do rather like him, and I don't think his version of those songs is a whole new. It's not a totally different way of looking at that song, but what he has got is a particular groove, hasn't he? He's kind of ferryizes these songs, and they have a kind of very kind of relaxed, comforting, warm, enveloping sound. It's a different kind of gear change, and I like that because I tend to like the kind of songs that he does, and therefore, if you're in the mood for going into that kind of fairy world, it's very comforting, don't you think?
It is. And I was playing his version of Bob Dylan's "A Hard Rain to Kind of
it's
Fall,"
good.
which is kind of really unlikely, isn't it, with the girly chorus and so forth, and the hard driving beat. But I really like that. Do you like? I think I sent you his version of Amy Winehouse "Back to Black."
Yeah, with the orchestra,
with his jazz band,
That's right,
Bryan Ferry Jazz Orchestra, and those things. He did that first of all just to see if his old Roxy Music songs would hold up, in sort of 30s jazz arrangements. And I think they do. And then that led to him doing music for The Great Gatsby. There's a record called Yellow Cocktail Music, which I think has got that thing Back to Black on it. And the other thing, and I don't know if you've ever heard this record. I've got it here, actually. I sent you a track. Have you ever heard this record? Holds up on Zoom call. Rogues Gallery.
Oh, yes.
Which is...
It's the sea shanties.
The sea shanties.
And he does a version of Lowlands Low. It's an amazing record. It's got kind of Greenland whale fisheries by Van Dyke Parks. And it's good.
Love this record. It's Hal Wilner put it together. It's got Richard Thompson on it. It's got Loud Wainwright III, Bryan Ferry. All, unlikely though it may seem, doing sea shanties or pirate ballads. It's absolutely fantastic. Came out a few years ago.
It's really good.
So that's one.
I prefer that to Roxy Music. Actually, I don't know why. Roxy Music I've never quite got. I appreciate how good they are, but they're just not quite. I'm not quite on their wavelength. But I love those. I love the fact that he just chooses these songs, and as I say, he kind of ferryizes them, so they have a certain emotional tone to them, and they have a certain pace, and that pace is never hurried. It's very sedate. It's very controlled, and it's very comforting, actually.
But he's also a champion of those songs like, I don't know, "You Go to My Head," or "Smoke Gets in Your Eyes," or what, those
old Broadway ballads, things sung by Frank Sinatra. Actually,
genuine. Well, I think it's kind of old school romance. That he's always carried a torch for that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I'm really glad he has done.
Yeah.
Because, hardly anybody else has done. But he's been responsible for keeping that strain going. You know? So, that's Bryan Ferry retrospective. Looking forward to it when it does come out. What else have we got to say, Mark?
Have we done any more that we should mention any other? We've done Ian Hunter, haven't we? We've done Joe Boyd.
It's all out there. Joe Boyd, who we're talking to in the next week.
We've got John Wood, who's going to be fantastic. John Wood, who produced those wonderful Fairport records and engineered and produced, Nick Drake and the Incredible String Band and John Martin. We're doing with Nick Hayward of the Mighty Haircut 100. Yes. Leslie Ann Jones has written a book about Christine McVie, which is very good. That's a good story.
That's all coming in the next week or so. And so, if you were thinking about becoming a Patreon supporter and to making sure that you got everything early in full glowing color where applicable and untouched by human hand, now cannot be a better time to do it. And if you want to find out about how to become a Patreon supporter, go to patreon.com/word in your ear and find out how you might get involved. And if you do it at the appropriate level, you could have a chance to be joining us on the occasion of your birthday, as recently did one of our Patreon supporters who told us about an interesting person he bumped into down the pub. Please welcome Matthew North.
The Word Podcast. Fix yourself a drink and it's like being in the pub.
Well, traditionally, any birthday patron gets a chance to chuck a conversational log on the fire and be, on the occasion of their birthday, be on our podcast. And we have Matthew North with us. Matthew, happy birthday.
Thank you very much.
When was it? Has it been?
It has been, yeah. It was a couple of weeks ago on the 6th of September, but I kind of think my birthday lasts a month rather than a day. So, I like to stretch things out with lots of things to do. And
that'll change when you get older. It'll barely get commemorated. But you've got a question you wanted to put to the panel.
Yeah, well, funnily enough, the other day I was down in a local pub, and it was the open mic night. And there were various people going up there doing a few songs. And there was one gentleman, I'd not seen him there before. And he went up and did a few tunes. He did one with a backing track, and then he did some of the perennial favourites afterwards, like Ed Sheeran and Oasis, with a complement of musicians behind him. He had a bass guitarist and a guitarist. And I didn't know he was a singer, but I vaguely recognised him. And afterwards I realised his name was Wayne Rooney.
Right.
And he was there singing in the pub after having many pints of ale.
That's astonishing.
Yeah.
Whereabouts do you live?
I live in Plymouth, and of course he's now the manager.
Of course, he's the manager of Plymouth Argyle.
Yeah.
So are you? Now, sorry, you're not pulling our leg, are you?
No, I was there. I do have evidence of it recorded on my mobile phone, which I decided not to share.
What I can't believe
he was there.
Is that he played and that wasn't filmed and put on social media?
A bit of it did hit the press, yeah. If you look up on the papers, you'll see a bit of him doing Ring of Fire, which is the one that he did with a backing track, which is why everyone says he was doing karaoke. But he was actually at an open mic night, and he did the other songs with musicians.
So was he introduced as, please welcome, Wayne Rooney?
No, he just went up and did it. But I tell you what, this is like the most famous person in this city. Everybody that went up to him wanting a selfie, he gave them a selfie. People wanted to have a chat, he'd have a chat. And we're saying this young lad is like one of the sort of faces on the sort of local music scene. He sort of egged him on to do a few numbers. And he did it with good grace and good humour. And I just thought, it just shows you that, he just having a bit of fun like everybody else.
I think that's brilliant.
It really is.
That's what I thought.
I think that's absolutely
I'm most
brilliant.
Impressed
it
by
increases my esteem for Wayne Rooney, which is already quite high, actually.
Very high.
Like I said, he was being really friendly to everyone, and I did video a bit of it on my phone, and I thought, you know what, I am not going to share this on social media because actually he's there having a night out, he's joining in with everyone, and stuff like that should be kept out of the public.
I agree, and not mocked and ridiculed.
No, because he was just having a laugh, and it was good fun. And afterwards, he was still chatting to people and stuff. And he has done this a few times, he has been out and about in town, and whenever people go up and talk to him, he talks to them back, and he's really friendly to people. I think he's a great asset to this town.
So he is the kind of, does he massively increase the celeb population of Plymouth?
Yeah.
Who are the other celebs, in fact?
Who are the other ones? I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, there's people that have either lived here who've gone on to do greater things. Obviously, people like, Dawn French, Angela Rippon. Then you've got, there's various singers. There's that guy who's Ed Sheeran's mate. I can't remember, Jamie Lawson or James Lawson.
I don't know.
He's from Plymouth. And then, of course, there's various other things. There's David Cross from King Crimson. He's from Plymouth.
Right. There's no celeb quarter in Plymouth.
No.
There's no Hollywood or anything.
Yeah, and the actor guy who was in Rocky Horror, the main guy in that, he was from Plymouth as well.
I'm right. Tim Curry.
Tim Curry. That's
Tim Curry. Right. I think what you're saying is there's no great challenge really for Wayne Rooney's celebrity status at the moment. No disrespect to all the others.
With his 30 million Facebook followers, I think it's safe to say he is the most famous person currently living in.
You see, I think I'm going to go further than this. You see, I think if you're the manager of a football team, particularly in Plymouth, it's a one club city, isn't it? Really, there's lots of reasons to fear going out in public. If you've lost the weekend, or people think you've picked the wrong goalkeeper, or you've done whatever, the chances of somebody giving you a hard time are pretty high. Yeah, to increase that by going on stage
and singing "Ring of Fire" in the local pub,
doubly courageous.
I really agree with you.
Well, I think he probably was all right that week though, because I think they played. Won. It wasn't a league match; it was some other match, but they had actually won that.
That's
week.
interesting. Does he go and do karaoke the night after they've lost? No, does he hide under a duvet somewhere with maximum security?
Probably not. But the funny thing is, of course, people kind of see him as Wayne Rooney, the famous footballer. They don't necessarily think of him as being the current manager of the local team and what the team are doing at the moment. I think everyone's still quite starstruck by him being in the patch.
Well, I think that's high quality, information. And high-quality personal witness. We'd like more of that, wouldn't we, Mark, in the future?
I think it was about a year ago after a Saving Grace gig, Robert Plant turned up at an open mic. And, of course, last week, didn't David Gilmour turn up at an open mic that his daughter was
doing? Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
It was a clip of that. Yeah, in Brighton, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah, in Hull.
Yeah, and that, sadly, I just looked at that and thought, how charming this is. And then, of course, one shot was taken of the audience, which is full of middle-aged blokes with cameras,
It was just a forest of cameras.
It was just, Dave Gilmour fans thinking, I've got a collector's item here,
There was, and there was a promotional dimension to both her album and his. But by the same token, it was sweet that he did it.
I think there might have been an element of setup with it. But I've got to say, having seen Romany perform live with her father on Sunday, it was a really lovely moment seeing them sort of smiling together. And she's a great singer. There's no doubt about it. She's a really good singer. So I think we'll see a lot more of her in the future.
Right.
Well, hopefully we'll see a lot more of people reporting on this podcast of seeing famous people in karaoke day. That's good.
Yes, we're all in favour.
Thanks so much, Matthew. Really good to talk to you.
This podcast was brought to you by The Word.